don't continue into this week. Yeah, I recorded a nutrition one with Aaron this morning at 8. We got like a minute in, and then our computer just shut down.
Oh, jeez.
I was like, oh boy, here we go. Hopefully my internet holds up a little bit better this week. But yeah, so as I was saying off air, having a phenomenal intro that we weren't recording, we want to talk about ankle mobility today. And the reason I want to talk about ankle mobility, because I think it's a really popular, hot topic. And I think that at a couple of different levels here. One, if I think back to my like super early career, like interning at Cressy Performance, you know, it's like we ankle mobbed everybody, right? You would have a superset of trap bar deadlifts, and you would go over and you do like your ankle mobs on the plates, or you do like the ankle mob into the wall type thing. And it's just something I haven't spent as much time on because, you know, as I've continued to grow and learn, ankle mobility has kind of become that thing that like tends to clean itself up a lot if we look upstream at things that are happening maybe at the pelvis and rib cage. And if we do a really good job with, you know, split squats and other activities, it's just like, I just have not found myself having to like really aggressively go after, you know, ankle mobility. I think like a lot of other people do. And I think maybe it's something that's misdiagnosed as the problem a lot of times, especially when people are squatting. You hear a lot of times like, oh bro, like you just need more ankle mobility. Like that's why you can't squat. And it's like, no, like you can't squat because your pelvis can't move, right? Like you can't open an outlet in your pelvis, so you literally can't squat. So I wanted to try to have a well-rounded conversation about ankle mobility and kind of where this fits, how we maybe can determine or diagnose people that, like, are there cases, let me start with this question here. Are there instances and cases where you guys are still actually actively prescribing and going after, air quote, ankle mobility? I'll go to you first, Lance, because you're like in my circle.
So short answer is not really. I'm kind of with you. Like I used to do ankle mobilizations, and if you've sat on a wall and you've done those for a few months, surely you've sat there and you've thought, is this doing anything?
The answer's no.
and if you haven't thought that, just give it to a client and they will ask you, like, what am I supposed to be feeling on this one? Oh, well, actually kind of nothing. I want to teach you to keep your heel down and transverse to project your knee forward, whatever. So short answer is really no. Like, I'm not doing mobilizations like we used to do them because I think they are a waste of time. I do think ankle mobility is great to have. And I believe, I'll just give you the short summary of everything. I believe most of that is predetermined or genetic. Like you're not going to fix it very much. But I do think the impact that you can have is probably with tonus in the calf muscles. So calf inhibition is a good idea.
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up. That was something I definitely wanted to make sure I mentioned to people. It probably has more to do with overall extension tone and what's happening at the calf is the reason that you maybe don't have as much dorsiflexion. Excellent. Keiran, pass to you.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I feel like just doing some of like the traditional ankle mobs, it always kind of stays the same. And then after a while, you're just like, oh, what are we doing here? So I think, to your point, any like inhibition drills to like shut the tone down a little bit just to give you more access is usually helpful. But I think just like even simply where like it still feels like training, but you can work around that is just like training like your tib or your calf, like just doing calf raises or just, you know, the tib raises, and like I've even seen implements. I think it's the Sky King, where it's like it comes out laterally and then you can start like inverting, everting, stuff like that. So I just think putting those positions under load will probably do a little bit more than any of the traditional like ankle rocks or, you know, whatever people typically prescribe for that.
Oh, I forgot about the ankle rocks.
Yeah,
I forgot about those. Like it's like a modified down dog thing, and you put like the one leg up over the other, and you go up on the toe, and then you like rock back.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I like ankle mowed my face off and got zero improvement for a very long time. Oh my God. But yeah, to your point, right? It's more about, I think, the inhibition of that calf, maybe like doing some toe raises or something to get a little bit of tib anterior on the front side to help. But I think, like a drill, kind of like a down dog with breathing, is going to do more to reclaim, right, like air quote, ankle mobility than any like of this like other stuff that I see people doing a bazillion reps of. But we can come back to that. We'll pass to Ryan Patrick here and try to get a bird's eye view first.
We do non-traditional ankle mobs every day, but we do them. They're called split squats. They're called squats. I think if you set those up correctly, you're really accomplishing the same things that you did with an ankle mob. But I'm with you guys. The traditional, like knee to wall, as simple as that is, there's still a lot of people I think that can mess that up. But I mean, to a bigger conversation, it's what are you actually trying to accomplish with an ankle mobilization? I would anticipate, most of the people that follow us or in the gym like we are, they're trying to get a better squat on some level. And I've never seen anyone improve their squat with ankle mobilization drills. Now, the other side of the conversation is more the athletics. I think in general, there's just an undertraining of the shank or anything below the knee. I mean, people will do some calf raises. I know with knees over toe guys, everyone's brought back the tib raises with the bar. But in general, I feel like that area is undertrained. But traditional ankle mobs, I mean, we probably haven't done one in 5 or 6 years at this point.
Yep. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Lance, I want to pass back to you really quickly on the tonus comment. I think that's really important here.
Sure.
So if we wanted to try to give a brief synopsis of, why someone's ankles may be like tight or they are lacking ankle mobility, whatever it is, like they don't have this dorsiflexion, for example, what's actually going on with that, tonus in the calf muscle? Because I think that is like kind of like the biggest culprit here, but it's probably not really talked about.
Sure, yeah. And I appreciate you framing the question that way, because I thought you were going to ask me to comment on pelvic outlets, and I just don't have opinions on outlet and inlet and whatever, yada, yada. But tonus, especially, so muscle activity is what we mean by tonus. There is, years ago when I was going through online forums and I was discussing things with random people I didn't know, that can go many different ways, obviously. Usually not good ways, but the simplification that I would use, and this was probably before I was even coaching, really, maybe almost 15 years ago, but the simplification that I used to use was, I am quad dominant and I need to be more hamstring dominant. And that has changed, and I think it's too broad to use anymore. Like, I like to be knee dominant in my exercises because of my levers and, because I'm short and I have thick thighs, but I can't activate my hamstrings because they're super long, right? So it doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore. But a parallel to that is this control of your center of mass, your weight. And when somebody is, we would say nowadays, when somebody is extended, the muscles on the backside of their body shorten, and that pushes you forward. So you can no longer, you are now, I wouldn't say you can no longer keep your balance, but you are now biased into falling forward from your balance, from your extensor tone. It pushes you forward. The same thing, extensor tone, calf tone, it's just extensor tone. It's the same thing, but it's in the lower leg. And it could be a mechanism for somebody to keep their balance. Sometimes maybe they've seen something and they found out that, hey, maybe I shouldn't arch my back. And so they stop arching their back, but they don't do anything to get rid of their extensor tone because they're still a stressed out person. And so they then switch their extensor tone down to calf tone. So to me, you're looking for, like in a warm-up or in a sensible training program, what we're trying to do is, it's okay to have calf tone, when you're jumping, for sure. And even when you're walking, it's just during the gait cycle, it has to cycle with the gait. It has to go on, and then it has to go off. And it has to go on, and it has to go off. And that's what allows the ankle to move. If the calf is unrelenting, then the ankle doesn't bend. But it's not because the ankle can't bend, it's just because the brain is not letting it.
Yes. And then I think that, within that realm, when we think about that calf, it's almost like, the calf is essentially turning on to make sure that you don't fall over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you have like this extensor tone, right, and you're kind of getting pushed forward in space, and people listening, you can do this. If you're driving in the car, don't do this. If you're standing in your kitchen, do this.
It still kind of works when you're sitting.
Yeah, and like you see it when you're sitting because like you're leaning forward towards that screen all day, like reaching your face towards it. But if you're standing up and you start to like lean forward a little bit, you're going to find that like your calf turns on because your calf's trying to make sure that you don't fall flat on your face. The fact of the matter is, this is where a lot of people live their life, like 24/7, 365, is kind of like getting pushed forward in space, and that calf is just holding on for dear life. And then it's like, you get on the table, and I'm like, man, you have no air quotes ankle mobility, right? Like the mobility's there, you just can't express it because your calf won't shut off or like turn down or release some of this tone, and it's doing it because it's trying to like essentially protect you, right? It's a protective mechanism. And so if we wanted to start there and think about strategies to actually improve this, we're calling it ankle mobility. I don't even love that term. It's just very catchphrasy. But if we wanted to improve this ability to express dorsiflexion at the ankle by getting a calf to maybe chill out and relax, what are some ways that we can go about doing that? Because I'll raise my hand here, be the first person to say, right, like I started this journey of like being really injured in college, coming out and trying to figure out how to like move better. And it started very much in that like Kelly Starrett realm where like you fucking mobilize and stretch and band and do all this crap, and it really didn't help me at all. And then it's like, once I started being taught how to better control a rib cage and a pelvis, and I did way more like 2 kettlebell front squats, and someone taught me how to actually split squat, it was pretty miraculous. Like my ankle mobility got, night and day better, and I could clean squat straight down, but I hadn't touched my ankles, right? And that was kind of like the first light bulb moment for me. I'm like, oh, okay, there's other stuff happening here. But if we want to think about that calf in particular, maybe, what are some ways we like to approach decreasing tone in that calf for folks? We'll go the opposite direction here. We'll start with you, RP.
Yeah, I'm almost in 100% agreement with Lance on this in terms of the center of mass getting pushed too far forward, and in a lot of cases too fast. And so what you'll find in addition to that extensor tone is people get kind of a late stance foot where it becomes, very rigid and locked up. So from a strategy standpoint, I'm mostly thinking about what's going on at the rib cage and the pelvis. We need to pull people back so that they can start to lengthen or expand, or whatever the terminology you want to use is, the backside of their body. If you just look at lifting in general and you take it all the way to the extreme, like a power lifter, you've just chased load your entire life. There are adaptive strategies that are going to take away certain rotations. It is, the SAID principle, if you will, because the worst thing you can do under load is rotate and move. And so we have to come up with some strategies that are going to allow people to recapture some of their ranges of motion, to get organized through the thorax and the pelvis. And so, the simplest thing that I can recommend for people is to just switch to more anterior loading, your goblet squats, your 2 kettlebell front squats. If you're fully committed to a barbell, something like a front squat is going to allow for a shift backward of that center of mass. You're going to be able to access more space. You're going to feel the scaps slide around the rib cage. You're going to feel the anterior part of the rib cage come down. The hips are going to be able to slide back under you. And the heel wedges, which are really popular for, quote, ankle mobility, again, are just a tool to help you continue to shift that center of mass back. So that would be something I would recommend on a lot of the bilateral lifts. As you get into split squats and stuff, somebody who's got restrictions in ankle mobility, or if they're squatting and you see a ton of eversion where it's like the lateral ankle lifts up and their feet kind of fan out. Typically, what we find is that they're missing a lot of hip internal rotation. And so I think getting back to the split squats, using half kneeling and split stance activities is really useful. So it could be everything from a split stance cable row to a split stance chop, split stance cable press, all the way to your half kneeling landmines and stuff like that. I think these are all useful tools for controlling the center of mass, for allowing people to get organized. Because again, if you just look at the foot, it's really a representation of what's going on in the entire system, because you have to find a way to get some force into the ground to push. And so once we start to shift everything back, a lot of times that tonus can chill out a little bit. We can start to restore some of those ranges of motion, and things gradually get better or improve over time. But I really want to emphasize, with the Kelly Starrett and even with some of the FMS stuff is, people are trying to look for these immediate and complete changes. And again, you have to understand a lot of these are adaptive and have accumulated over time. So we're talking about just getting a couple degrees better of range of motion week over week or month over month is really kind of the way that I would approach it.
Yeah, I think kind of to piggyback on that, like, because you want that change to be sticky. It's like we can do tricks, like we can do things like reclaim a lot of range of motion very rapidly for you on a table. But the question is, like, do you actually hold on to that when you go into the real world to walk around, to lift weights, to sprint, to jump, to cut, to do these things? And so that's where, like, a lot of those really quick, flashy things that look cool, they don't stick around very long, right? And so I'm in total agreement with you here. Like, for me personally, and then for a lot of my clients, I can tell you that anterior loaded activity has been probably one of the biggest game changers for them to be able to improve what's actually happening at the ankle, right? But we're not specifically attacking the ankle. We're attacking like the thorax and what's happening at the center of mass. But because of the fact that, we're doing more 2 kettlebell front squats, I even love like a 2 kettlebell front rack split squat, right? These activities that are really putting a premium on like getting a rib cage, getting a pelvis, and then moving and controlling that through space, right? And like you can play around and tweak that thing a little bit, but like having consistent exposure to that done correctly and coached correctly and executed well does way more to improve, air quote, ankle mobility than sitting there and just like on one of those slant boards and just like trying to stretch the piss out of a tight calf. So I think that's 100% in agreement. Keiran, let's go to you, my man.
Something that I don't think gets talked about enough, and as a former basketball guy, I think if you just sprain your ankles enough, you'll get all the mobility you need. So, plus it's sports specific, so that it checks a lot of boxes just to land on somebody else's foot, I think. But
that's true. Just get rid of all the ligaments and tendons, and you'll have that thing's going to move all over the place.
My buddy's got a super loose ankle. They're ready to go. No, but I think these guys nailed it. And like coming from basketball, where again, like I was a big time jumper, so like everything is just, even still, right, after years of chasing more ankle mobility, like it's still relatively tight compared to what it could be, right? But like what everybody's been saying so far, like shifting your weight back, right? So we're starting from the middle, and then everything out from there will probably move a little bit nicer, as opposed to you're just kind of hanging on by your calves to keep yourself from falling forward. So I would even say, like, to piggyback off what Ryan was saying, like wall reference or like floor reference, where you can physically feel the shift backward with the rib cage and to peel the tailbone off. We always talk about creating a really solid stack position. I think that's a really easy place to start for most people. And then I would say if you wanted to, if someone thought that they needed more traditional, air quote, stretches or mobility, anything that would address the stack while decreasing the tone on the backside, like you said, like a down dog position where you're really reaching driving the floor away, feeling the ribs come back. I personally really like a lot of inchworm, kind of like pedals. I think those are a really good one. Even if somebody's missing like some plantar flexion, like a couch stretch from the wall, even if you need a support to take some of the intensity away, because that could get pretty gnarly for some people. A hand support so you can take a little of the stress off, but to just start getting some of that back as well, I think are some probably better, air quote stretches, mobility options for people, because it addresses what's going on in the middle, and then it all follows downstream potentially.
Yeah, and 100% agreement. I think if people are looking more for like drills they can do, because we've been talking a lot about like exercises, like 2 kettlebell front squats, split squats, like that's training. But I think the important note here is like good training inherently also is probably helping you move better. But if you're thinking more like drills that you can do in a warm up or a cool down, or things that you can just get exposure to, I think the down dog is amazing. Just like a held down dog position, kind of like an isometric. You get to the top of that down dog where you reached, you're letting your ankles and like your heels kind of drop down to the floor behind you. Hips are high and back, and you hold that and you breathe. That's a phenomenal option and exercise here to get exposure to. And then, yeah, I love both forward and reverse inchworms as well. I love kind of a walking forward inchworm where and it's not like you did at, high school sports where you just kind of flop your way around. Like you walk your hands out, stay nice and tight, and then you slowly walk your feet up as far as you can. And then once you kind of reach the point where you're like, I don't think I can go any further, reach those hands really aggressively into the ground, let your heels drop, and see if you can hold there for a couple of breaths. And then walk your hands back out and do it again. What you're going to realize is like that tone on the backside of the body with every rep and every breath is slowly going to decrease and let go, right? And I like the inchworm going in reverse as well. I think those are like some of the really nice big global catch-alls here that you can get more exposure to and more reps with on bodyweight circuits, warm-ups, and cool downs to maybe help improve this a little bit faster. And I think an important point, Keiran, that you brought up that we have to mention is, stiffness, especially in the periphery down at a place like an ankle. Like, there is not a single human on this planet that is really fast or jumps really high that is not stiff at the ankle. Like that's not a thing. So I think that's really important to highlight for folks. It's like that stiffness is doing something really, really important. Like if you go look at someone in the NFL or the NBA or any sport, and they're like, damn, that dude is fast. He is quick. He is springy. He can jump like crazy. He's going to be fucking stiff at the ankle because he has to be, because the stiffness is what allows him or her to do that thing that's so impressive, right? We can kick that around here for a second. Maybe I think Ryan Patrick looked like you maybe wanted to.
We got so many head nods here.
We got a lot of head nods.
Yeah. The fastest guys in the gym, hands down, and I'll just thinking of my NFL guys, for example, they carry around the Theragun because they are so stiff. I mean, it's like between sets, between reps, they are wanting to do that. But I don't know who said it. I think it might have been Eric Cressy who actually said it. What makes you spectacular makes you susceptible. That stiffness is a gift from the gods, because it's something that's almost impossible to train that level, that magnitude of explosiveness, because it's just like such a coiled spring. But there are consequences to that, and that's one of these things you have to balance. And I think that's where we have some utility as trainers to really think about what we're doing. I think that's where the value of strength training is really lying with these athletes who are super stiff, because it does allow for some remodeling of the tendons or the musculotendinous structures with the slow, heavy loading. Not so much for force production, because again, they're under these time constraints where they have to produce these rapid forces, and strength training at a certain point just starts to deviate from that. But I think as far as insurance and keeping them healthy, that's where there is a lot of utility. And so we can use these activities that we're talking about to not only change the structure of, their bodies, but actually use it to help restore some of the things that they're giving up. Because when you're fast, when you're oriented for speed, I mean, you just have so much extensor tone. Whether you're super strong, whether you're super fast, those guys almost walk around like they're still in the squat rack. If you know what I mean. I mean, they're just so yoked up on the backside. But again, it's like, that's the thing I mean, that's when you see a great athlete, is just they have a certain level of stiffness, but I mean, it's almost to them unbearable because they're just constantly trying to get loose, to create some length. And I suspect, and this is kind of a random aside, I think that's why a lot of those really fast guys like training in sand, because it dampens the amortization phase. It makes it a little bit more muscular. They're not using as much of those tendons that are already super stiff, but it feels like they're working. So I think in a roundabout way, it almost feels good for them to not utilize those tendons so much. But again, that's just a random aside.
I like it. Keiran, Lance, any follow-up thoughts on that?
That point is so important. And as somebody who is slow and weak, I can tell you this is real. Like, I'm super mobile, man. I could move all sorts of movements, especially at the ankle. But I'm so slow, man. My vertical so slow, so low, you know.
That's a really interesting point about like the sand training, and it just feels good. I know, again, I'll just anecdotally, just myself, because I like literally I am the typical, was super fast, jump high, but like everything was so damn stiff. I mean, I remember in college, I was so jacked up and so extended. All the older guys on the team wanted to fight me because they thought, why is this kid walking around with his chest out? You think he's all tough and stuff? Like, literally, it was wild. But I mean, literally, I was also breaking backboards because I could get up and just hammer it, right? But like the things that I always felt best with was things that would, like, I'd feel really relaxed after. Like, to your point, was a little more of like a muscular effort, and like just having that other side, filling the other buckets of like slow movement, intentional movement, letting things relax and come down. Like, to your point, where we can come in and add the value the most, and where I valued my coaches the most, is the guys or girls who would just provide that other side of the coin, right? It's really easy to just throw more weight on, just jump higher, whatever. But to have a little of the variability, where I almost think of that's like the healthy side of the performance health spectrum, is where we can add a lot of value to people, just to give them a little bit of breathing room, not change it, not like, change their ankle or their stiffness so much that they lose pop or things like that, which who knows if that's even possible for certain people, but just enough of the other side that they feel good.
Yeah, because you don't want to take that thing away, right? Like, it's a balancing act. Like, I want to give you just enough of this input to keep you healthy, but not to try to rob you of this thing that makes you really special and great. And likewise, like, if you're the person that's just like super loosey-goosey mobile, it's like we probably want to help you find more stiffness because it's going to probably help you feel a little bit better. But Lance, I think you had something you wanted to say on that.
There was one point from Ryan, and then there was one point from Keiran. With Ryan, we're going to talk about speed of contraction, and with Keiran, something else. I guess we're starting with speed and contraction. So you cannot, if you have somebody at these high levels of performance who need high levels of force production and power output in very short periods of time, right? You can't look at them, see that they're stiff, and say, okay, well, they need ankle mobility, so I'm going to give it to them, and expect their performance to stay the same. Because when we have mobility, most of our, like, you have to understand where force contraction is, or force production is coming from. It's coming kind of from the muscle, but muscles are stronger in an isometric contraction. So if I need the muscle, or if I can get a situation where the muscle doesn't have to change length, I can display a lot more force, but sometimes I still need to change length. I still need to move. In the case of the calf, is the calf contracts isometrically. The Achilles tendon, the calcaneal tendon, lengthens, stores all of that energy like a really thick rubber band, like Ryan's saying. You keep that stiffness, and then you can conserve it. So on top of all of this, it's much easier to do an isometric contraction than it is a concentric one. So I get less fatigued. But more importantly, like I can prepare the calf, or I can prepare, let's say, the gastrocnemius muscle by just saying, hey, hold your length, hold still, buddy. And when I start to load it, all that has to happen is the tendon has to stretch. So I take my brain out of the equation, and there's no muscle shortening contraction, concentric and eccentric cycle that is going to beat that, because it has to go all the way up to the head and then back down.
I like it. I was waiting to see if you were going to have a moment of brilliance and remember what you wanted to talk about from Keiran.
Me too.
All right. So, in summary, if ankle mobility is something that you think you're lacking, you think you're missing, you think you need more of, I think I would encourage you to maybe reframe the problem and think about it in a different way. Some really good drills that you can work on in this realm would be things like, a downward dog hold with breathing, letting your heels fall towards the floor, or breathing inchworms and things along those lines are really going to help manage that calf extensor tone we talked about. When it comes to training, using more anterior loading, 2 kettlebell things, front rack things, where we get your hands out in front of your body and doing squat variations, split squat variations there, are going to make an enormous difference in your ability to express, because that's really what we care about, is your ability to express mobility and range of motion and control at that joint, right? But then we also have to appreciate kind of in the higher performance realm that, like, if you have that stiffness, it's probably a gift, and you don't want to try to rob it and take it away from yourself or from someone maybe that, you're seeing. You would probably do more harm than good. I don't even know if you could take it away, to be totally honest, like you guys mentioned, right? But I think that's kind of, if I was going to give people a summary of like this whole ankle mobility conversation, it's probably stop spending time doing ankle mobs and just like stretching it, because it's probably not helping. Down dogs, inchworms, choose better squat and split squat variations, set it up better and load it better, and it's really going to naturally improve for you day by day, week over week. Anybody else have any closing? Lance, let's do it.
I might have remembered.
Okay, perfect.
Keiran was talking about, Keiran made me think at least about specificity of training. And in our, like in school, we are taught, this is one of the 5 basic principles of training. Like, you need specificity. If you're going to get better at something, you have to do it. And that is very true. You just have to understand, as a trainer or as an athlete, where are you on the spectrum? Because generally, a sport coach is going to assume that you're lazy and not really training at all. And so they're going to give you a whole amount of training that is enough. And then you're going to go do your other training. And in those cases, you probably don't need more specificity. You need more generality. You need the way that Ty and Tony said it in their book, Force and Power, about velocity-based training, was, I want to give you what you don't have. And that is a mechanism to keep you healthy, so that you can keep training. It's not necessary. I mean, it might augment your training performance a little bit, but it's more so just like, hey, let me give you a little bit just so you can stay together.
Yeah.
I love it. Sweet.
Sorry, that was my last point.
No, that was good. I like it. Anybody else? Any final closing thoughts from the team here?
No, it's good to go.
All right. Sweet. I think that was quite good. I hope people found that useful and beneficial. These things are tough, right? Because it's like the visuals, I think, on this would be so helpful, right? Like, if somebody was in here, we could actually like take them through like a down dog and like interim variations and like what a squat should feel like and what a split squat should feel like. It's like, these things are great to talk about, but it's like, you got to kind of learn by doing to get those light bulb moments of like, oh, that's what this is supposed to feel like. That's how the setup is done. But yeah, if you guys have any follow-up questions on this, just reach out to us on Instagram, drop us a DM. Happy to try to help out any way we can. But
cool. Thanks, guys.